Good. Hi. Welcome to the extraordinary meeting of the council this morning. Apologies. Okay, we are there. All good?
I'll be an apology from about 11:30 on. I've got an appointment I've got to attend.
Thanks, Eric. We know that. So no apologies. We will move to any declarations of interest this morning. Anybody aware of any public forums, petitions, deputations? Also not aware of any. Confirmation of minutes. We do have a confirmation of minutes for the ordinary meeting of council on the 28th. We don't actually have any minutes to confirm this. I'm looking at it saying 28th of August. Was it wrong? The last one.
14th.
Okay, so the previous meeting, you have the minutes. Are there any changes, additions, or alterations? Which should have been 14th of August. I went to the top of the page. It's for me.
I'll move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Morris. Seconded by Phil. No questions or alterations. I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Move to 6, which is the adoption of committee resolutions. There are none for committees. Notification of extraordinary items. There are none. Haven't been made aware of any questions this morning. Chairman's and councillors' reports. I'm probably going to wait until the next meeting to report on local government conference and the regional tour. But does anybody else have any reports this morning?
We finished our community awards judging. We tidied up yesterday, and I can't remember the winners. Can you? Oh no!
Phil.
Just to report that the Regional Climate Change Working Group, we've seen the Phase 1 regional strategy recently adopted last week by Gore District Council and adopted yesterday afternoon by Invercargill City Council. So that's tracking well. Pleasing to see that being adopted by 2 of our 5 partner agencies so far.
Very good, Phil. Okay, if there's no further reports, we will move to item 10. 10.1, which is the representation review night 2024 initial proposal hearings. Right. Do you want to comment on the report, Rachel, or take it as read?
Actually, the main thing to note at this point is the need just to progress those 4 recommendations, and you can go straight into the hearing where there's obviously a number of submitters in the room.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, we have recommendations 1 to 4 that we received the report. We note 2024 adopted on the 17th. We received the submissions that we're going to hear, and we hear all submissions who wish to be heard. So we've had the some that don't wish to be heard, we've got the others we're going to hear today. Would somebody like to move recommendations 1 to 4?
I'll move the recommendations, Chairman.
Moved by Neville, seconded by Lyndall. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing any, I will put the recommendation. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Well, the first submitter are going to submit by Zoom, but they're not here yet. So we have second up is Lloyd McCallum, who is here in person. So Lloyd, we'll welcome you to today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to be back in the rooms, but differently on this side of the camp than when I was on the other side. But anyway. So you read my submission, so I just want to make a couple of comments around the outside of there. Now the big question is, how do you put the 12 best people around the table? There is a balance between governance and representation, and right now I think governance is needed more than representation. You are a $50 million turnover business, you have 30 million in investments, you have an $18 million debt and growing, and you seem to have your rate increases at 4 times the forecast rate of inflation. This is not sustainable. You're building up hardcore debt, especially in the first 4 years of your long-term plan, and it doesn't seem to be in repayments through the first 3 years of that period of time. That's why the general public and the government are now focusing on what their councils look like, what they do, what their core business is, and to get the best value. And you're now starting to see changes come about by amalgamation talk and other parties talking about how do we take costs out of a structure that seems to be going against the tide of what is around us today. When I look at the electoral system, and I was a part of that for 3 elections, you seem to have 2 systems side by side. One is that you have in Invercargill, which is the best 6 go forward, the top polling 6 go forward. But the rural sector seems to have 6 constituencies, varying between 1 to 2 councillors per constituent. I have a view, and after being through the process a couple of times, that the rural sector, you can call it a rural ward if you like, should be the top polling 6 go forward to the council arena. One of the reasons I say that is that if you're a councillor wannabe and you want to put your name forward, do you stand against the existing councillor, or do you go to another ward? And in my case, I went to another ward for 3 terms. But I think when you look at it in its wider context, you want the best people around the table. And in some ways, the rural sector doesn't allow you to do that in a proper organised way. When I was on the council, a number of people would ring me. And sometimes they were my neighbour, my friend, a family member, maybe the same agricultural sector, recommended by another ratepayer, or because of my council position. In other words, people rang who they were comfortable with. When was the last time you stood in front of ratepayers and told them what was on your work streams, telling them about the decisions that were coming that you had to make decisions on, and take them on a journey of understanding and knowledge and education before the final decisions? I think, to be fair, even when I was on council, that happened very rarely and was not a good way of saying that I represent my ward, when in my submission you'll read there that, did you sit around the table and say, I've got 3 views in my ward, I've got those for, those against, and those that don't know? And my biggest question as a councillor was, I don't know how big those each party were. I don't know how many were for or against, and how many didn't know because they didn't understand. And what view did I put around the council table? Was it my view? Or was it the majority of the squeaky ear in my ear? What was the view that I presented forward? Just a reminder, as a rural consent holder, you can take me to the Environment Court and I carry a charge. For the Invercargill City, you take ICC to court and ICC carry a charge. It is very hard for you to get to an individual within the city reign. It can't be done that well. Regardless of the problems that are in there, the city carries the conviction, not the individual. I know you've got other people coming today and they're going to ask you to redo your ward system and they want a seat as of right because of population or whatever. But I ask you to look past that and consider the big picture. You want 12 of the best people around this table. And I'm suggesting that my view is that that goes a long way to that, to have the top polling 6 in Invercargill and the top polling 6 in the rural area. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hearing and reading my submission.
Thank you for that, Lloyd. I have Robert, Peter, and Morris.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Lloyd. Just to clarify, you opened, I think, with the idea, the proposal that you don't like to see individual councillors tied to a geographical area. Would that also mean that perhaps we could draw our councillors from outside of our region, so we could have Otago people representing us here if they're the best person for the job?
Right now, as long as you are nominated by 2 people within an area, you can put your name forward. So I would say by default, you could live in Auckland and be a councillor in Invercargill as long as you were voted in under the voting system that you have. You, I know, live in Riverton and you represent Invercargill. I live at Royal Bush, Lockhill, and I represent the southern constituency. I didn't want to put up too many barriers for people, so I didn't look at whether you had to be in the ward or in the area. I kept out of that. It was about how to get the best 6. And you do have the right to invite others in for short term in some of your committees as well. So, does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, thanks, Lloyd.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Lloyd. You know the inner workings of this place very well. So this is very well said. I want to ask you a question, just 2 parts to one question. I'm curious on your councillor training. You had a point around that. If you could expand on that. But I also want to just challenge you a wee bit maybe on a rural ward. We see in some councils where there's one big ward and there's many councillors vying for those positions. It can become quite a competitive environment that goes beyond an election and starts to run into the term of their work. And we've seen it on some councils that internal competition can be quite disruptive. How would you guard against that so the wards take care of that, they do a separation, so we're not competing with each other. How would you guard against that scenario?
Let me deal with the first one
Yes,
first.
please.
The biggest difference between a director and a councillor is that as a director, I would hold directorship insurance effectively. Because I would be liable. Today around this council table, the person that's liable is not you as councillor, it's actually the CE. The CE has a huge responsibility on her shoulders, in your case, Wilma, but you as councillors don't. Because you're councillors, you're not directors. Put that aside, to run a business like this, and I tried to emphasise the size and dynamics and the range of things that you have to deal with, you need to be upskilled, because I'm going to say to you that not many people in their normal lives should run a business this size. With this complexity, with the number of staff and interactions that happen, and you only have the ability really to go through one person, that's the CE, to do that business. The CE employs all your staff. In my business, I can go anywhere I want to with my staff because I have the ability to run between working the tractor, putting in nails, right through to directorship. You need to have a full understanding of how that business works, what you can and can't do, and that's why I suggest directorship training, because it's the easiest way to get an understanding of the business. Your second point is I think you need to have some sort of breakdown and not just a one board, one for 12. I think you need a breakdown. There is a natural barrier, and I try to point it out, because of the way you physically work. Those in the TAs you treat differently because you actually have another body in the middle to those in the rural sector. So there is a natural barrier there, and that natural barrier I think needs to be basically take away some of the barriers. I'll give an example. When I first stood for council, I was up at Grant Hubbard. Stuart Colley had just left, there was a vacant ward. I thought, I could have it out there. I was travelling up and down because I was with Frontier at the time. And I thought, well, I'd be better off to be in my home backyard doing some work. I lost the election. It became a dairy farmer, sheep farmer debate. I lost the election. I got in later, but to do that, I couldn't stand against Grant. I went down to another ward. So
We're running out of time. That was one
Sorry
minute to
about
go to
the
Bell,
question.
but I've got 2 or 3 others I'd quite like to have their questions. I've got Morris, Lyndall and myself, and that will be it.
Thanks, Lloyd. I think the greatest argument that we're likely to hear against your proposal is that you may not be able to represent people in areas that you're not familiar with. And I know you've made an argument about the bigger picture, but how would you counter that argument? Just repeat, it'll be some of the things you've already said, but if you lived in Wyndham, for example, how would you represent the people who live in Te Anau or Tuatapere? So,
the short answer is I'd actually go there. I'd be there like the lads. I mean, you go there and actually see them and understand them. You know as well as I do that there are some things I'm not fully aware of because it's not my background and other people on the council are. So you point people in the right direction. You recommend them to go to the person that has that qualification. I just take the view that representation is a big word. We think it means a lot more than what it actually is, but when you look at it on the ground level, we don't do representation that well. And we can actually do that on the council table more so than because I come from the zero, I represent these people. There are times that Neville might be better or Linda might be better to represent the people. I would actually push them to there and say, you'll get a better understanding from that person than you will. I'm not fully understanding. That's for sure.
thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Lyndall?
Thanks, Chair. Just really quickly, on your on the printed copy of your submission, for the do you agree with the proposed constituency boundary changes, the cross is in the yes,
Yes, that was.
but then your explanation is no. So can you just clarify which one of those it is, please?
Quickly, I had a heck of a job getting this form printed off. I did it manually. I wrote it out and thought that's too messy. I'll print it out and send it in a printed form. I had a hassle to convince your back room that I could not download the PDF file. It took me 3 days, a heap of email. I've got it done. When you actually fill that form in, and this is something I didn't do, at least I was a submitter, it is actually quite hard to do, and you've got to move the cursor around.
Right. So
And it clicked in the wrong place. So yes.
given your explanation, I'm assuming that you're not in agreement with the boundary changes. Is that right?
Well, I can't be because I've recommended something completely
Thank
different.
Right, just quickly, and as you know, at the moment, we're bound under the representation rules, taking communities of interest into account, plus or minus the 10%, and also generally trying to align with territorial boundaries. So thanks for coming in, and I think, you know, over the next 12 or 18 months, we're probably going to have a more general conversation about how Southland should be represented. We can't handle it all here, but really appreciate you coming in and making your points.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you for coming in.
Do we have the first Ricky Orr online?
Get out in the community a bit more, right? Robert's been wiped off the.
Yep.
Keep your GPS locator on.
Yeah.
I'm scared. Do something to you.
I have no fear.
So is that One one of that screen there now, is that plan, Aaron? Can you hear, can you hear us, Aaron?
Not unscathed. Any of us.
Hello.
Can you hear us, Aaron?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Welcome to the meeting this morning, Aaron. Just, you've got 10 minutes. You probably would like, we can have time for questions within those 10 minutes, but the floor is yours, Aaron, so time starts now, so welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'd take the submissions is read. We would just like to say on this, by S is quite large, and it seems like a land grab from Invercargill to use us and not have any representation. Hence why we'd like to actually have some representation or some facility to be represented a lot more on Environment Southland as a community, separate to the council itself. We realise that it's generally based on population, how you set your structure up, but as with the community board here, we've had permission from the Government Act to represent only 450 people because of our special status and distance. We don't see that as big. Well, that's not an only precedent throughout New Zealand. That is also could be done by you guys as well, or have a representative dedicated to us, Bluff, or whoever is separate, as instead of having the whole 6 councillors representing Invercargill and us, and no one ever seeing them or knowing who is actually the easiest point to contact. Because I don't imagine having 6 councillors representing Invercargill is 50% of the work throughout for the size of the district. Yeah, as we have another part of this was probably because we haven't seen a councillor here for a number of years. We don't really know what we're up to, and I imagine that is the same through a lot of small communities throughout Southland. That's pretty much the basis of what how we feel, I suppose. Is there any questions on that?
Thanks, Aaron. I'll pass over to questions. I've got Peter, Robert, and Lyndall. Peter, go.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your submission, Aaron, and good on you being involved in the community boards as a chair. It's pretty tough out there at the moment, I understand, so look, good on you for doing that. I just want to pick up on your comment around facility to be represented for representation. Are you suggesting that maybe immediately after an election we could nominate an Invercargill City Councillor to be
Constituency councillor.
Yeah, to represent your special interest area as you've described it, to maybe attend your community board meetings and other such events on the island? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I'd almost go slightly further than that. As part of the election process, bit like have a STV vote on the side. So the people that from each constituency could actually rank who they'd want to represent them as a side vote. While it's all very well having someone being appointed, it would be good to actually have a little bit of a choice in that fact as well. I don't see as that being too hard a thing to probably arrange.
Okay, thank you.
Robert. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, your idea of more contact between a councillor or some councillors and yourselves on the island is a very sound one. I remember travelling over with a number of staff some years ago for a meeting where islanders were able to share their concerns, but only one person turned up. So, and it's expensive to send us over there. So I just wonder, do you see a way that the organising of people on the island wanting to speak to a councillor could be done from your end? Because it's very difficult from this end.
Oh, I think it's relatively easy. We've also been having community meetings on a regular basis. Oh, sorry about that. Hang that up. On a regular basis, and we did have staff come to the last one, but it's not always quite the same having staff there as the people that round the table that make the decisions to get the feel of it. So there was invites for that. Whether they got to the top table, I don't know. But things like that wouldn't hurt to, or would be easy to participate in for a councillor or a couple of councillors.
Sure, thank you.
Lyndall.
Thanks. My question's been asked, Aaron. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess, you're probably aware that we're sort of bound by the constraints of the current Representation Act, which talks about, plus or minus 10% of the population. The communities of interest are definitely there, and generally trying to line up alignment of boundaries. But I think you make some really good points, and if you had somebody designated, I know a lot of us try and get around our community boards, once or twice a term, make use of public forum, but I guess it's got to be a two-way conversation. I think your points are valid, and we'll certainly, it may not be a change this year, but there certainly should be better communication, because you are a community of special interest, and so thank you for your comments. Any further questions for Aaron? If not, thanks for taking the trouble to actually come online and put the island's views forward. So thank you, Aaron.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Hope to see some of you at some stage.
Well, good. We like Stewart Island.
No, that's good. Okay. Cheers.
Cheers. Okay, next up is Federated Farmers, Jason Herrick. Welcome, Jason.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting us here today to talk to our submission. I'll take our submission as read. It's important to note this is a very busy time for farmers. I would have had a whole lot more here around the table with me, but unfortunately they're all calving and getting ready for lambing. I'll take our submission as read, but I'd like to make the following points. Okay, the representation for the Southern region is broken. Many councils are running out of money due to central government imposed requirements such as upgrading water infrastructure and poor financial management. While we appreciate that the representation review is a legal requirement, it should be used as an opportunity to communicate with central government that the system is broken. Southern cannot continue to sustain itself financially under current arrangements. The impact of Southern's council's poor financial positions impact significantly on farmers, as farmers often pay the majority share of rates. It is farmers who are in the best position to pay rates, but as a result, we have seen significant rate increases through the LTPs in Southern for the rural communities. The current representation in Southland is dominated by urban interests due to the population base being mainly in Invercargill. This creates an inequitable situation for farmers who pay a significant share of the rates. The council could consider electing councillors at large to ensure better rural representation. With 6 councillors elected from Invercargill, rural ratepayers are always going to be underrepresented. We urge you to use this review to start a conversation with the community about the options for the future. To start with, you could conduct service delivery reviews of your activities to see if shared services may be an option. We support the move to start the conversation around amalgamation of the councils in Southland. With the recent announcement that well-beings will be removed from the Local Government Act, it is crucial that you focus on core services only and how best to deliver these. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Questions? I've got Peter to start.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Jason, for coming in. Yeah, representation, it's a word we're going to use all day. It's quite a long word. And the more you say it, the harder it's going to be to say. I know that. I just want to ask you, as we're talking now, this conversation's come up, it's out in the atmosphere now, isn't it, about aggregation of service, amalgamation, whatever you like to call it. How do you ensure that grassroots representation stays in the region? I'm talking in the rural areas, that's your speciality. When we aggregate services, we tend to aggregate decision making to a larger entity. How do we ensure that representation and that say remains in the region?
You need to make sure that community boards stay, as representations from the South, and as we've seen from the previous submitter in Stewart Island. That's important to have that voice coming from that area. Same with all of the small rural communities throughout Southland. So the community boards are a must to get that representation review or opinions through to the main council.
Thank you for that.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Jason. With regard to your comment about the imbalance of councillors, rural and urban, I wonder if you read the comment by Tom Campbell, Deputy Mayor, just recently in the paper, where he said it's the other way around, that in terms of the formula that's used to decide these things, the rural area is overrepresented, and he feels that needs to be adjusted back to make it fairer on the bulk of the population.
I think, given my comments, Robert, I'll totally disagree with that statement, to be honest with you. When rural contribute more in the way of rates to council, how is that? How is that less or more?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Paul.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for coming in. I agree with your idea of efficiencies, and I see it's a bit of a drive currently with the central government. Efficiencies and also cost reduction is a big thing. We're talking about amalgamation at the moment. Where would you see efficiencies being brought into all of our councils while still continuing to have representation?
I think main efficiencies we can make is going back to our core, what we're here to do. What we're, rather than branching into areas that aren't what we're set up to do. Having an amalgamation of all councils, it brings all councils into one. And we have, I love the idea around unitaries, one for the city, one for the rural. That way we have, it's still segregated in that sense. But chasing efficiencies across the board would see, rather than councils trying to work together or work against one another to achieve outcomes for the community, it can all be done under one roof. Then going forward, that's how we chase efficiencies going forward. That's just my own personal opinion on that one, Paul. But we've got to get community buy-in on this. We've got to get community opinions. Consultation is absolute key. We've got to make sure we set it up right. We've seen, examples right around New Zealand where amalgamations haven't worked because the process has been done incorrectly or unfairly or unrepresented from our local communities' opinions or lack of that consultation.
So a continuation of that would be, efficiencies in organisations are usually driven from business ideals over bureaucratic ideals. Would that be the way forward for councils to adopt more
that sort of thing.
Just getting back to our core values, getting back to doing what we're supposed to be doing rather than not. Spending money on the must-haves rather than like-to-haves would be just ideal.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? As you know, Jason, the representation review is quite narrow. We're bound by rules, but I think this council and the other councils should be up to have a conversation on the future. But it is it's a different conversation than we can really give much leverage to today. And if we started with a blank page, you'd have to look at all the options and probably having the courage to look at all of Southland rather than rural urban. But that's a debate for the future. But thanks for coming in this morning and submitting.
You're welcome. As all 3 times I've sat in this seat this year, I think this is the most important discussion we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Chairman, can I just raise a little point of order, I suppose? It's my understanding that it's important that councillors don't express an opinion while we're hearing submitters, because it's important that we're not predetermining any outcomes while we're doing that. So am I correct in that?
No, that's a good point. We are listening to submissions. We don't, at this stage, we are not, and we can get into difficulty quite quick if we appear to be predetermined.
So just
yeah,
a caution
for councillors that are asking questions. Right, Doug Fraser, would you like to come forward?
Morning, Mr. Chair, councillors. Come and speak to my submission.
Welcome, Doug, and you know there's 10 minutes, and you're good to have time for some questions, but the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll take my submission as read. As you could see, there was a good deal of frustration from that submission. Because essentially, I'll have to say, put it on the record that I've lost confidence in the current government structure to deliver fair and effective representation here at Environment Southland. And the direction of travel for local government is unsustainable. A classic example is the failure to respond to community input around the LTP, where I got a letter from the council saying that, and I'll quote, significant community support for increased flood protection in the region. And yet I'm reading, what submitters said, that there was a proposed increase in flood protected operating expenditure was a 71% fail rate, a no rate. So what I'm saying is that the representative governments have failed to respond not only to the economic conditions that exist in the community, the science that reports back to this body, and to central government direction. One bone of contention that I've had for many years is the management capture of the regional forum process, and it illustrates the dysfunctional nature of representation. Where we've got NGOs and iwi having a disproportionate say, and for example, iwi are involved prior to the process, during the process, and following the process. By comparison, myself as an interested ratepayer was actively precluded from that process. Even though I made representation to councils, that injustice was not addressed. Other classic examples of as the Stead Street pumps, there's no accountability there. Science inputs, which I've mentioned around the Aparima nitrogen levels and the IPPC inputs on climate change. The change in funding system moving to a system where there's no accountability in the future, and submissions were ignored, as I've previously commented. So what I'm suggesting, and I know what you're saying is that you've got to keep this very narrow and keep it within your legislative requirements. But this is the opportunity for me to say something about my frustrations, but it's also an opportunity for you as councillors to have a look at the wider picture. I was involved in One Southland over 2 or 3 decades ago, actively worked to have one council for all of Southland and South Otago. So it's interesting to see what Rob's views are on splitting it into two entities, 2 unitary authorities. And it does have some attractions now when I think about it, because you would carve off the costs of urban Southland, and it'll be interesting to know how the unitary authority for Invercargill would meet the cost of the Stead Street pumps, for argument's sake. So this is not the time to shuffle the deck chairs around as small marginal changes in your thing. It's your responsibility to undertake a fundamental review. And if you're not going to do it, this week or next week, perhaps it's time for you to settle on a system that you're going to address not only Rob's initiative, but the frustration that we're expressing as ratepayers. So happy to answer any questions.
Peter, then Robert. Peter.
Mr. Chairman, thanks Doug for coming in. I'll just pick up on your last point that you spoke about. You talked about one council, the district council's proposal. They've just put it out there. It's just an idea. That's all it is, about splitting rural and urban. Do you think if we went together on the urban, we would have enough scale to provide the savings that we need to have well into the future? With the city containing over half the region's population. Just a comment on that, please.
No, my preference is to have one Southland for the whole of the Southland province and South Otago for the region as well. So we got the scale, so that we're a serious player when we go to talk in Wellington in the future. We can be just picked off at the moment because we're just so insignificant as far as numbers of people. We're a very productive group of people. We vie with Taranaki with per capita on our inputs as far as exports into the world market. So we should be taken seriously, and I don't think we are. That's my view.
Thank you. Robert.
Thanks. Thanks, Doug. You expressed some concern, well, a sense of injustice, that your view was not given the same credibility or strength as the view of iwi. Do you feel that iwi have a special place given the Tiriti o Waitangi? Or do you think you don't? That's the simple answer.
So it's going to take a bigger forum for me to discuss that. When I look at read the work and you say that you have a partnership agreement, that's debatable really. That's a need for you, but so I don't want to get into that now. The facts are that I, as a ratepayer who make a significant contribution to the rates that run this organisation, felt I was actively precluded, and yet I looked at what happened over the process and saw that were involved in putting together the regional forum, were involved in the regional forum on a day-to-day basis, and then had a crack at, once the regional forum came up with the thing. And the same happens here. I read the documentations around this process. I see that iwi were in on the ground floor talking with you people prior to you going out to the public. Now, I can read their submission, okay, but I'm not sure. Well, put it this way, I feel that I'm a second-class citizen, that my views aren't as well considered as iwi's. And I would suggest that may be the case with some NGOs as well, in my experience in the past. So I just challenge you that the balance is not right. Does that answer your question, Robert?
Yeah. Thanks, Doug.
Any further, Jeremy?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I'm trying not to give an opinion, so I'm going to ask a question. Do you know how many people live in Invercargill?
Sorry?
Do you know the population of Invercargill?
Yeah, it's about 35,000 or whatever.
I think it's 57 or 60,000. Do you know the population of Southland District, Gore District, and Clutha District?
Well, it'd be just about 120, is it? Yeah.
60,000 people. So I'm just I wanted to not telling you. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Do you think we should have a bit more discussions around the amalgamation, but looking across borders as well in this for representation and working together?
Yeah, and I've got some views around how that's structured that may not necessarily be amalgamation, and it'll take me a bit longer than the 10 minutes, but there is ways of having, through Paul's point before, having commercial organisations to deliver for the political organisations that exist. So, there's that sort of system works some way in this province, where you have a commercial organisation with a commercial focused board that are well trained, referring to Lloyd's point, people that have got governance training that focus in on delivery and management of local government services. There is a way of doing it, and I think it's a big conversation. But it should be involved in that conversation around amalgamation. Amalgamation is not the only way that it could be done. But I would be strongly of view that some you have to step forward because it's unsustainable the way it is at the moment. And I think we're selling ourselves short in the big picture.
Thank you for coming, Doug. Just saying, Jeremy, not trying to ask a question, but with regards to population in Southland as a whole region, there's a lot of movement within population in Southland. And in my constituency, we work on the census as our population, but at any one time, probably more people in Fiordland than there is in any part of Southland, excluding Invercargill. Sure, they're not ratepayers, but there's also a lot of ratepayers there that have holiday homes that are from Invercargill as well. So there's a lot of services that we provide as governance in a lot of areas. And even though we're basing it on population through census, do you think it's fair that we do that, or do you think it's fair that we look at rural as a whole or urban as a whole?
Well, as I said in my submission, you just don't want to be focused on shuffling around the hectares, and doing that sort of thing is, I believe, doing that. I think you should be looking at a bigger picture thing where you're getting commercial disciplines into delivery of services. I'll probably leave it at that.
Thank you. And thanks for coming in, Doug. You know the constraints of the representation review, that we are bound within a certain level of things that we can't change individually. But the larger conversation that you and a number of others are raising today it is one for the future, because it'll be a talk fest unless we get a pretty unanimous decision around Southland, because you still have to go through a poll to actually make change. But we're hearing that ratepayers can't afford the living system, so that's the starting basis, is actually how do we get a better system.
Yeah, and it probably shouldn't be just it shouldn't be just based on affordability. It should be based on the bigger picture, how we can benefit the total province as part of the New Zealand Act, if you like. So
Thanks for coming in. Louise O'Callaghan. Welcome, Louise. Come forward. Welcome, Louise. You have 10 minutes. Probably good to have time for some questions at the end of it, but the floor is yours. Welcome.
Right. So firstly, in being here, I'm actually like a little bit, I submit to the council, but anyways, I'm very nervous. And I've realised this morning, I don't really want to be here. And why I'm here is that I read the Southland Times in an article about the City Council representing on my behalf on the representation review. I'm going, oh, that's really interesting. And I'm one of the few people that get the paper. And then in the same paper, I actually saw your ad and I, for the one time, clicked on the link and it was really easy. It's a pretty simple discussion. It's not much to get my head around. I'm really analytical out with my submission because to me it's a no-brainer and kind of an administrative thing to correct. And I also think if it's about fair and effective representation, and all 12 councillors, actually, it's not as intimidating in here as I remember. I used to have really big chairs and it was, I don't know, anyways.
We're nice.
12 councillors who have put your energy to represent Southlanders. And I actually don't pay that much attention, but I assume that the systems, the laws and the systems will look out for me and my representation. So now I'm understanding for 6 years past, there's actually an imbalance. And your proposal for the future will perpetuate that status quo of underrepresentation. And sort of thinking about it with my analytical brain, because I'm like, oh, this is maths. And actually there's errors in my submission because I did it at 4:54 p.m. in the last hour or the last hour and a half. So it's about statistics. And so in Fiordland, the statistic one way, it doesn't matter so much. There's 4,000 people, but the underrepresentation of Invercargill City, this is significant because it's actually, there's a whole electorate missing. There's actually 10,000 people missing out of you represent 103,000. It's 6 wards, it's 58,000 residents who are underrepresented. And it seems a matter of administration to correct it. I put in here, oh, well, just tweak the bound, but actually it's not for me to have opinion, but I'm thinking actually, I actually have come around to the fact that it's just easier to have a 13th councillor and everyone else has their representation. And so, and I was a bit of stick to my notes. So a 12% variation can't be dismissed as insignificant when this Invercargill electorate is so large. It represents half, more than half, 58,000 of Southlanders. That's who you represent. So it denies us fair voice to 58,000 people. And so to me, it obligates you to act to rebalance representation and gain an extra councillor. I said that anyways, reallocation is cost effective. But then I think, no, I actually think that the 13th would be the easiest. And to me, don't you just make your decision, delegate it to a boffin in administration who sorts it out for you. You have 44 million expenditure, and I understand now remuneration authorities, but I've come up with a basic council is $40,000. That's less than an employee. And 40,000 for a bog standard councillor, whichever one of you is bog standard and doesn't have a hat sort of high on a remuneration. 40,000 out of 44 million expenditures, 0.0009 extra money to just, the system should just, I shouldn't have to be here. I think that you should just fix it. And I think the electoral process I'm here because of principle. I believe in principle that the electoral process must be upheld as fair. The population's changed, you need to fix it. Simple procedural matter. Anyways, and it seems, so I've got that to not vote for amendment implies disrespect for upholding the principles of democratic representation and disrespect to 58,000 residents who've lost equality with their rural colleagues. Because we have an equal sense of belonging to wider Southland and the same interest in best, most practicable oversight and outcomes for our shared Southland environment, coast, air, and all that environment Southland stewards under law. So your current, this current proposal is rubber stamping and approving continued unfairness of representation for another 6 years. It's like we've got less weight. And this is not appropriate when change and correction can be achieved effectively with simple administrative decision and minimal costs. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then I sort of also, this is weird, I would like to ask why you're not doing it. Why, if it's just an administrative thing, why don't you do it? And then I'm going, oh, remuneration authority, that stays the same and it gets divvied up irrespective of the number of councillors. Does your remuneration go down? Then I'm going, oh, no, it probably doesn't, because in 2025, if you approve an extra councillor, does the remuneration authority not adjust every year? And I go, oh, there's been a change here. I don't know, but I hope that when you stand, if you approve 13 councillors, if you choose to stand again next time, you'll know, I assume, the remunerations, and that would be a known status quo. There's also talk of urban-rural representation. And that might be a tricky subject, so there is a balance here now, and an extra councillor may tweak things. But I'm also thinking, well, Invercargill's not Wellington. We're not like, really, I don't see us as a liberal, greeny city. I think we're a fairly conservative bunch. I have a farming family, I have farming friends. There's retired farmers in Invercargill. People are employed, the businesses will serve farming farmers, the engineering businesses. We are intimately linked. There's not, I mean, urban people, there shouldn't be, I don't see any great distinguishing between the values of urban, rural Southland, and if there's discussion around the rural voice, well, it's like, hang on a minute, this is the urban voice that doesn't have the same weight. I just am seeking you to, I feel that your policy should be amended to as a matter of course, and I think that's about all I wish to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Robert, Jeremy, then myself.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm so glad you brought your analytical brain in.
Yes, I'm analytical, yes.
And we're not allowed to say things other than questions about, man, that was refreshing to hear you say those things. So my question is, and I asked the previous person this, I think, but did you read Tom Campbell's comments in the newspaper along the lines of what you were saying here? That that the balance is not right and that it's too far towards the rural in terms of numbers, and he was calling for change to redress the balance in the same way that you are.
Yes, I may not word it that way to make any judgments about balances. I just know that there is a whole ward short. It's just as simple as that. And the perceptions around urban-rural balance, I, in a way, can't make them. But possibly that's right for those whom that interests. Is there a rural balance now that but as I say, I don't see the values. Rural people, if they hold, if I do have a sentence here, if they hold not dominance, then that's through an imbalance, isn't it? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, this is just a democratic process, and it's about, and it depends on who stands in those urban wards. This is a process, and you discuss and debate, and it should be at a fundamental basis as it has to represent. Because why else do you invest 44 million? It is for the 103 residents of Southland, something like that.
Jeremy.
Yeah, just quickly, look, you make some really, really good points, and you've done very well in explaining I like numbers too. It's a numbers thing, and you've actually presented it really, really well. My question, and I've actually really enjoyed listening to you and the understanding of the community and the rural tie with the cities. We're all linked here. We're very few people in Southland, but we all rely on each other. Really. We live together, and my thing, my question, it's quite an interesting one, could we encourage you to be, we will have vacancies within Invercargill. It's actually, and my question is encouragement. How can we encourage people like yourself to stand for the elections?
Actually, I admire those who, all of you who do give your time and stand, because actually I don't think that, yes, I don't know how to, I think at the end of the day, it's solely me here, because most people, that's quite right, they're apathetic. They entrust you to look out for them, and there's only a certain calibre of person that is this. I can't answer that. So I do have a comment though about the previous discussion of the proposed amalgamation. If there's an appropriate time, I could say a sentence. My reaction to that in context of what I'm saying now, I'm going, well, what? Forget the 1 seat short. I'm going, is that actually saying that urban people are only going to talk about the Puny Creek and the estuary, and that we don't have an interest in our coast and an environment? I'm going, that just cannot, that surely cannot be the proposal.
Thank you for coming in and submitting this morning. We are sort of bound by the constraints of the Representation Act, so we do have to take communities of interest into account. We do have to try and work within the plus or minus 10%. But we're also supposed to try, wherever possible, to line up with the territorial boundaries. So somebody had stood on and saying, well, we don't really feel we're part of Invercargill. You could quite easily carve off Bluff, Invercargill, and actually bolster up one of the other rural ones. So, but it's complicated. But we listen to the submissions, and
Actually, thank you. I can't address that, and I am open to that concept, because all I know is that I feel you ought to have the representation for that missing 8,000-9,000. And if they gave strong arguments, then I have no opinion on that, and that could well be sensible. I couldn't.
Look, thank you for taking the time to come and submit.
Thank you for listening to me. Sorry, I've got some good points, and I also talk too much. Thank you.
Thanks, thank you.
Josh Cumberland. Welcome, Josh. You've got 10 minutes. Ideally, I guess you'll leave some time for questions at the end, but the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So I recently sat through all of Southland District's LTP deliberations, and I observed that the councillors often had to be led through issues by the management staff at a level that seems that should have been comprehended going into the deliberations already. And I understand that as councillors, some of you are working full-time in other jobs. There's a lot to comprehend here on these issues, but in reading the submissions for the LTP at Environment Southland, or for the consultation on climate change, or even this, there seems to be overwhelming opposition to a lot of the policies that the council is advancing. And even in the final LTP decisions, there doesn't seem to be enough concession by the council to actually meet the will of the electorate. My perception has been that this has been going on for a long time, and it seems to be getting worse. And I think that the issue isn't democratic representation here, but rather management structure in the council, because that seems to be driving how these councils function ultimately. What Rob Scott's proposed recently about amalgamating does have merit and should be investigated further, but with adequate public notice and transparency. Auckland's council seems to have issues, but the region seems to be overrepresented, and we need to reduce costs, and also ensure that we are reflecting what the voters actually want. So my idea loosely for an amalgamated council would be to empower the catchment liaison committees. They seem to be doing good work at a community level. And I think that we need to go back to a community level for managing this. So broadly speaking, centralizing the governance and I misspoke, centralizing the technical capacity of council, but decentralizing the governance. So I would suggest looking at having 3 representatives for each of the major river catchments elected by the catchment liaison committees as a better form of representing people of Southland. And I know that that skews more rural than urban, but I think that that would be a more efficient way to run this. The submission that stuck out the most when I read through the LTP was someone reminding us that the original catchment board had 3 employees and a budget of $66,000. And I know that that was a long time ago, and that with the Local Government Act and the RMA, things have gotten far more complicated for the council to manage. But I do struggle to understand how what the 140 odd people that work here full time are actually achieving. So I think that by putting more of the governance power into the liaison committees at catchment level and retaining technical staff centrally to support that, we would probably get better value for money, and also more democratic engagement, because most people just want clean rivers that their children and grandchildren can swim in. Like, I think we can all agree on that, but the issue really is people fighting the councils and the councils fighting the people. We could all sort of move in the same direction if we were on the same page and repairing trust, which has been violated by lack of transparency, lack of adequate notice for consultations. I found out about this because I just stumbled upon it at the library. The LTP was the same story. Somebody put a letter in my mailbox, already past the original deadline because it was extended. So those sorts of things can't continue without the council losing its consent to govern. So I understand that this representation review is mandatory, but I don't think it's going to go far enough to fix the issues that a lot of people here are concerned with. So that's all I'm going to say.
Do we have any questions for Josh? Jeremy?
Just to clarify on your, you talk about historic Maori names in regards to their constituencies around the river catchments groups, if you change things. But I was trying to read your sentence here, but have you got your submission for?
Yeah, that was a facetious comment.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so.
But it said, it just says they should be changed to the historic Maori name, so the majority of the literate struggle to comprehend. I don't know whether there's a word missing there. I'm just trying to, I was taking it that you should put it that everybody would struggle, but is it that you would change to historic Maori names? But there is a point that people would struggle with
No, but
pronunciation.
I would see it moving in that direction, but no, that was just a joke.
Okay.
Um,
All good.
Thanks, Josh. And, there has been conversation about whether our catchments should become more like community boards. And it's something you've sort of raised there. So look, so thanks for taking the time to come in this morning and to answer that. Next up is Invercargill City Council. Welcome, Michael. Welcome, Michael. The floor is yours, and you probably know the rules pretty much anyway. It's 10 minutes, and probably we'll have a limited time for questions at the end, but welcome.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Michael Dave Tokarewa. I'm here representing Invercargill City Council in on their behalf. I've been away on holiday, so I'm just catching up in relation to the items that were in here. However, before I start, because they have given me what they would like to be spoken to, before I start, I do appreciate the challenges that doing a representation review and how hard it is to undertake. One of the items I would like to highlight that they haven't given me my notes, but I think given the stats, etc., is quite important, is acknowledging that the challenge of using outdated data in relation to actually doing a representation review. It has been highlighted as a challenge that you have to use 2018 data to actually represent what you're doing going forward. But I think given the confidence of the draft 2023 statistics, they haven't significantly changed the proportions that sit within the boundaries. While they have had a lower projection in relation to the numbers, the balance is still about the same. So that gives you some confidence, I'm sure, as you report. However, the focus of what I will go through is not about rural-urban divide. It's not a decision around land mass. We're simply asking that you have fair representation in relation to the largest rate-paying group. They are the ones who vote you into council and should be fairly represented. Invercargill is 56% of the Southland regional population. That's based on the numbers that are in there, and as I've stated, they are similar to what's in the 2024. Therefore, make up your largest rating base. How Invercargill and Rakiura currently only have 50% of the representation. This is currently, as you've highlighted, and breached the 10% component of the local electoral. Based on the rules of the Act, it is that Invercargill and Rakiura is underrepresented. Looking at population per councillor basis, Invercargill and Rakiura sits at one councillor per 9,718 people. But in keeping with this Act, the number should be 8,667 per councillor. Meaning that your largest ratepayer base, Invercargill, Rakiura, are underrepresented around your table. Just want to touch on the local electoral act for a second. The local electoral act drives this review process. At the heart of the act, it is focused on people, representation of the people, and it exercises the democratic right to vote to who is elected to be on the council. The decision of representation is not based on land mass, not based on urban and rural. It is simply based on fairness and equity and ensure that the areas are represented correctly as per the Act. As councillors, you have the responsibility to represent and voice the views of your constituents, and as it currently stands, as you're proposing, you're knowingly underrepresenting your largest ratepayer base and the decisions that will impact on them. The proposal has been outlined in the submission. I won't go through all the details. But what Invercargill City Council is proposing is very simple. Return your constituents to the heart of the decision and make that everyone is fairly represented and fairly and adequately represented. We believe that most efficient and effective way to do this is to add an additional councillor to the Invercargill-Rakirua constituency. We've gone into this in more detail, obviously, in the submission, but this option appears to be the City Council to be the fairest way for you to ensure that people are at the heart of your regional decision making. All we are asking for is fair and effective representation for your ratepayers. People need to see that their vote matters, counts, and is reflected in the way that represents their community. As an elected member, the time is to act is now. Please show your ratepayers that they are your focus, and in fact, the heart of local democracy.
Thanks, Michael. Questions of Neville?
Yeah, just, recognising that the setup at the moment is based entirely on numbers. Do you see any decisions being made at this council which favour one side of rural or urban development? Because that, to me, would be the real issue.
In answer to your question, that Councillor, it doesn't come into the representation review from that perspective. The representation review is just about getting fair representation and the voices being heard. So I can't identify a specific one for you, Councillor, and wouldn't choose to, because I would hope that you all take a fair balanced view as councillors. So that's got nothing to do with the position.
Morris.
I think that answered my question. Thank you.
Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your submission. The word is that we are a regional council. And I just would like to ask you about another possible solution in the comment, if you could, on that. Your submission is coming from the city. You've stated that. We have to look at everything. So I'm seeing sitting at 12%, we need to get that into that band under 10. Is there a possible solution? I'm seeing the southern constituency needing more ratepayers to get into that of taking, they're adjacent to the city, them taking more, which would suit a mesh block or two out of there, which would actually fix the problem and bring the city down under 10. Is that something that we should consider as a council?
Through the chair, I'm not looking at this from perspective of the city council, and we're voicing it on behalf of ratepayers in that perspective. So it's not for us. It's not about city council boundary. It's about representation. We're speaking on behalf of Rakirua as well, which is actually Southland District Council. But just to highlight that, these are the boundaries of the regional council. To get your fair representation will be a challenge with what you've got as your existing boundaries acknowledged. All we can do is voice based on what you've got, and the only way to bring the biggest ratepayer into line in relation to the 10% is the additional councillor. You do have other challenges within it, within your representation review, and understood. And I have seen that myself and undertaken other representation reviews as well. It is a challenge, and to actually correct those other components, you need to look at boundaries in relation to that. And I'm sure your staff will advise that is a lot of work in relation to that, and a big challenge.
Robert.
Thank you. Yeah, very good. And I appreciate you taking the view of numbers, or numbers are where it's at in terms of the review. I wonder what your view is on if we didn't respond in the way that you're indicating. What might be the repercussions?
Thank you, Councillor. That's actually an interesting one. You'll know this needs to go up to the local government commission. How they respond, I don't know. You have to justify in relation to a breach that's in there. Your challenge will be that you've got sequential breaches in relation to the that 10% for that ward area. I can't give you comment how they'll respond, that's going to be their interpretation. But they will look at number of years of that occurring and no statistical data to demonstrate it's going the other way.
I wondered also in terms of the population, the people of Invercargill or Southland, if you had a view on that.
It's probably not something I can speak on. I'm speaking, as you've noticed, I've spoken purely about numbers and representation, making sure their voice is heard. I can't speak for them on their voices. You've heard one today that I'm aware of. We would need to hear from their voices in relation to that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. And we did have a community board who submitted earlier saying they felt that Invercargill didn't represent them, that they had no specific council, etc. So quite, as you pointed out, it's quite an odd situation where you've got STC as a territorial, but in the regional thing, we've lumped all that together. And as you know, we need to look at communities of interest, we need to look at the percentage, but we also, where possible, are encouraged to try and stick to the boundaries. So interesting points, and I'm sure that the council will deliberate and come up with a conclusion, but at the end of the day, the representation people will make the final decisions if we're outside any of those areas. So thanks for presenting today.
Thanks, Mark.
Right, so that is the final in person. Okay, we're now going to that is the end of submissions, I guess. So we move on through the agenda. Extraordinary urgent business, there are none today. Public excluded business, which we do have. So last of the reasons why we're going into public excluded.
Yes, so the reasons we're moving into public excluded is to allow council to carry out commercial activities without prejudice or disadvantage, and also to enable any local authority holding the information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities. And just one moment.
Heard the reasons. Would somebody like to move the public